All right, everyone is talking about Governor Whitmer's proposed budget, especially when it comes to spending more money on Michigan schools. Well, I caught up with Nolan Finley from the Detroit News and Stephen Henderson from WDET Radio for a debate on how that money can solve a bigger education problem.
It's a good start pushing us back up the ladder.
Right.
In terms of where we rank among other states who spend money on education. The question is about outcomes, right? I mean, there are two tracks in education reform that we've done poorly in the state. One is funding, of course, and this is a big step in the right direction. But the other is management and accountability. I mean, we switch systems all the time. We hire and fire superintendents. There is not the same kind of consistency, and the danger of spending this money, more money on education, without doing those other things, is that you don't then have the outcomes to convince people that it's worth it, right? People are very skeptical about the idea that, some people are skeptical of the idea that you need more money. We do, but we have to prove that we need that money by making sure this improves the lot for our kids.
I think, though, Nolan, when you take a look and you say we need more money to put more physical people in a building when it comes to counselors, whether they'll be career counselors or whether there be college readiness counselors, or if you need counselors for mental health, anxiety, you have a large growing crisis among young kids in schools, and schools are trying to handle that need, and money does buy that expertise in those bodies.
There's no question we're understaffed in those support areas. I don't think this money will survive in the budget. I mean, I hope there'll be some additional education funding, but this largely depends, this originates with the gas tax. This money is coming from the gas tax, and the more that gets,
number, that 45
that 45 cents, the more that gets whittled down, the less likely this is to survive. I think we need to do some fundamental reforms, structural reforms in the state both to generate better outcomes, as Steve said, and better accountability, but also to get greater efficiency. We have too many school districts. We could do a major consolidation of the school districts and save $600–700 million to spend in the classrooms. But not only that, you wouldn't be dealing with all of these small, understaffed school districts. You could consolidate all of the administration and put best practices in state across larger districts.
But can you do that at the same time that you up spending, and for districts that have needs with special education, can we continue to wait for this larger governance question, or this larger consolidation change in the state school board?
We got to do it all. We got to start.
Or do you think it needs to be happen?
I think you got to be able to walk and chew gum to some degree. And I misspoke there. It's not 1,800 school districts. It's 1,800 municipalities. Yeah. I think it's closer to 600 school districts. But that's still too many. A state like Kentucky, which is notorious for over government, right? Has 120 counties and 120 school districts.
That's how it is in most states.
In Maryland, there are 13 because there are 13 counties. Yeah. There's a lot of room for us to get to a better managerial space there. I think if you start with the idea that the ISDs, which are county-based, might be the only school districts, and maybe add some in for special cases like places like Detroit, which probably needs its own, and Grand Rapids and things like that. The governor has an opportunity, because she's new, to start talking about those things, right? The budget address is one thing, you have to do that. But she could also lay out a pretty ambitious reform to school governance that over the next 4 years you could chip away at and maybe get to some of those outcomes. And again, that reinforces people's faith, I think, in the idea of spending more money. When you are getting more for that money, it's a lot easier to sell it to voters.
And we've got to stop talking about school funding in terms of total funding or even per pupil funding. We've got to talk about school funds in terms of the amount of money that actually makes it to the classroom, because too much of the education dollar is not making it to the classroom. It's paying for legacy costs, it's paying for administration, it's paying to pay off debt. A big chunk of the money, and even the increase, a lot of that goes into paying non-classroom costs, never makes it to the student.
Well, legacy costs our classroom costs. The idea that you would not provide for teachers in retirement, I think, is a strange idea. Given
that's not what I'm saying, Steve. There are changes you can make. You could change retirement age, for example,
sure.
so that you're not going out in your mid-50s and collecting a pension for 40 years.
That's fair.
I mean, we've got to take a look at what we spend outside the classroom and get that number down. That number should be going to support good teachers and good classroom resources.
I want to talk about the higher ed, the community college for all idea that she has, that they're estimating that could cost about $80 to $100 million a year for that. Do you think that that has a possibility of staying in? And that's, something that her goal is to make sure that 60% of the population has some kind of higher degree, higher kind of either training certification of some sort, Nolan.
I think it has a chance. I mean, but then again, it's not just a matter of we're going to write the check, you go to community college. We've got to increase community college capacity. We've got to start thinking about maybe shifting resources. We got 3 universities in the Upper Peninsula. Do we really need 3 universities in the Upper Peninsula? We got to think about
what do you
how
have
we
against
spend.
the UP, Nolan?
Well, there's about 14 people up there in 3 colleges. But, it's not just everybody goes to community
all
college.
kinds of mail now for
I was
people
just
in
going to
UP.
say, please email N. Finley at...
Yeah. You can get free community college. You live in Detroit now. You get that from this Detroit
From the
contract.
Detroit Promise.
And
yeah.
Detroit Promise. And
now.
very few students take advantage of it. I don't think it's a panacea. The most important thing we need to do is get kids ready to go to college and succeed, because too many kids we are sending to college now drop out after the first year.
Yeah, I mean, all of this stuff it's like this complicated pyramid she's built, and if you pull one piece out, does the rest of it fall down? It all depends on this.
Yeah, but
this
isn't
tax
that
increase.
with sometimes most budgets, if you're making some kind of drastic
Sure.
change
Oh,
or
yeah.
investment?
Yeah, but here there's this revenue ask, which is new, right? We haven't done that in a long time in Michigan. The thinking when Governor Snyder was here was, let's lower taxes. Let's ask for less. Let's give people tax breaks and hope that creates growth or jobs.
Which
it created some. It didn't raise incomes, and other states that were growing revenues, like Minnesota, lapped us again over the last 8 years. This is a different approach, and this says that it's worth investing in things that ask us to sacrifice because there's a payoff on the other end. You've got to make sure that payoff is there, and that's a hard sell with voters.
Is it a difficult sell for her as well, Nolan, because she has 2 major issues on her hands that she wants to be able to change: roads, infrastructure, and education?
The education portion of this, I mean, obviously, I would have thought she'd have been politically smarter to simply focus on the roads this first year and get that in place. The education plan feels a little half-baked. It's trying to tack and attach solutions onto a system that's fundamentally broken. I think she's making the same mistake Rick Snyder did, and the ideas aren't broad enough or big enough. This state needs an education revolution. You've got to start at the beginning, figure out what's going wrong, blow it up and rebuild it. And Snyder didn't have the courage to do that, and it looks like she doesn't have the courage to do that either.